the coronavirus.
Good morning, and thank you for choosing Quarantine's News at 9. I'm your host, Nicole Kemi. It is Monday, May 4th at 9:02 a.m., and we're giving you round-the-clock coverage of all things related to coronavirus. Today, we'll be discussing the civic discourse surrounding the virus and just how well people seem to be handling the uncertainty of this pandemic. And coming up, news reporter Alicia Khan will discuss how COVID-19 is affecting our food access and food systems. Now, with the coronavirus pandemic sweeping across our nation, the Center for Disease Control has enforced that limiting face-to-face contact with others is the best way to reduce the spread of the disease. However, after nearly 9 weeks of self-regulated isolation, many Americans seem to be taking quarantine matters into their own hands, whether that be for better or for worse. In fact, many citizens have decided to protest our country's very own shutdown laws and claim that we should reopen all facilities. Our camera crew has documented this live footage of the protests, so let's take a look. All right, so as you can see here, many Americans are not happy with the restrictions of public policies that have been put into place. This has created a sort of battlefield for civic discourse, where there is a clear divide amongst the American people. On one hand, there are those who are refusing to abide by the varying social distance and quarantine laws in place per state, and there are also those who are encouraging these policies in order to ensure for the safety of others and ultimately stop the spread of the virus. In fact, some civilians have found creative ways to smartly socialize and show their support, such as disinfecting and donating supplies to hospitals, surprise birthday party drive-bys for a friend or family member, people applauding from their homes to frontline essential workers, virtual hangout sessions, and so much more. Evidently, this is reframing everyday definitions of civic discourse, and we're creating a new normal amongst the American people. Additionally, we have asked Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, to speak about the potential risks of these anti-quarantine protesters and the messages that the protests themselves are sending. His response is as follows.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the message is that clearly this is something that is hurting from the standpoint of economics, from the standpoint of things that have nothing to do with the virus. But unless we get the virus under control, the real recovery economically is not going to happen. So what you do if you jump the gun and go into a situation where you have a big spike, you're going to set yourself back. So as painful as it is to go by the careful guidelines of gradually phasing into a reopening, it's going to backfire. That's the problem.
Dr. Fauci concludes that the pandemic is simply casting light on the pre-existing unjust systematic policies, and that it's not the virus's fault for the economic downturn. Well, that's all I have here for today. Now introducing my co-host Alicia with her food report.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm your co-host Alicia Khan, and you're watching Channel 12 Quarantine's News. In the past few weeks, we have seen instability manifest itself across all sectors of our country, but most importantly in our food system. Farmers now describe themselves as being helpless against the wrath of the COVID-19 pandemic on their businesses. We interviewed 2 tomato farmers from Florida. Listen as they describe their current reality.
I probably have in the neighborhood of 60 to 70,000 boxes that I'll leave in the field. Not enough customers for all the tomatoes, beans, squash, everything that's raised in Homestead. We're all struggling.
And the best way I can describe the situation we're in right now is truly helpless. The clock is ticking, and every day that goes by is another box of tomatoes left in the field to rot.
You think you've seen it all, but I don't think anybody living's ever seen anything like this.
Without large businesses like schools or restaurants open, farmers don't have anyone to sell their harvested crops to. Many farmers have made efforts to donate as much of their products as possible, but there's still a huge gap between farmers and emergency food. Either charitable organizations don't have enough space to keep that much fresh produce as they lack freezers and refrigerated spaces, or farmers cannot directly get in contact with such organizations. We hope to bridge this gap to minimize food waste and maximize donations. Speaking of schools, many low-income students are at risk of going hungry because their schools are closed. It is the unfortunate reality that for many students who receive free and reduced price lunch, that is their only meal of the day. And since schools are closed, these same students are going hungry because their families cannot afford to feed them, especially during the added financial strain of the pandemic. Some schools across America have summer lunch programs where low-income students are given free breakfast, lunch, or both, provided by the school at designated pickup locations. Some schools have attempted to implement these summer lunch programs during the pandemic and school closures, but many attempts have been largely unsuccessful and underfunded. How do we go forward in trying to protect an already vulnerable population during these uncertain times?
We quickly realized with school being out that our neighbors right here near the church, and then extending outward and through all of Wake County, where kids were not going to be fed breakfast and lunch. And so we knew there was going to be a void, and we wanted to do our part to fill that need and to help feed families.
Including America's low-income youth population, millions of other Americans find themselves going hungry in the last few months too. Earlier this year, the Trump administration made major budget cuts to our social nutrition programs such as SNAP and WIC. We are seeing the drastic negative effects of this underfunding play out right now with the coronavirus outbreak. Besides barely having enough benefits to feed themselves, those who rely on SNAP are denied service from major grocery delivery services such as Instacart, Amazon Fresh, and Walmart. Considering that many who rely on EBT and SNAP are either disabled or considered as part of the at-risk population, it is imperative that they are offered access to these alternative foodways. For these individuals, going out in public during a global pandemic is especially dangerous, as they are more susceptible to the virus. Fortunately, some delivery services have agreed to start accepting EBT for online and delivery orders. We have interviewed Professor Smith, head of food studies at Syracuse University. Here's that footage now.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for having me on the show. What I think it is important for people to know is that the COVID-19 pandemic is not creating issues within our food system. Rather, these circumstances are just exacerbating the existing inconsistencies that have always been around. Other scholars, like myself, have always been privy to the instability of our food system, and now everyone else in America is too.
Thank you so much, Professor Smith. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. I'm Alicia Kahn from Quarantimes News. Back to you, Nicole.
Thanks, Alicia. Well, that concludes the Quarantimes Morning News at 9 for this Monday. Thanks for watching. Once again, I'm Nicole Kemi, and from my co-host Alicia and I, have a great day and stay safe.